Alright, so I'm pretty much gonna go down the list here. The weather seems to be a topic of conversation, so yeah, it's pretty nice here. Hence why I'm on the roof. It actually is pretty great now that it's cooled down a little because it was really hot. Yeah, we kind of got hit by that heat wave a little bit. Not so much here in Pennsylvania as it was in Connecticut. Yeah, our fans managed to get it down to 98 degrees, but that's still not great up there. I'm not making very much sense, am I? And that bodes well for the rest of the video, doesn't it? Anyways, first real thing on the list is the whole liking things on principle versus disliking things on principle. Really disliking things on principle is not something that I think too much about, because I feel like I make a point not to do it. I'm just more likely to like something or to consciously decide not to care about something or choose indifference. That's probably a better way of saying that. Yeah, that than to actually dislike something. So usually if I actually do dislike something, I'll have my reasons for it, so it's not something that I worry about too much. Not to say I'm perfect or even anything close to that. I definitely have my biases, and I'm kind of having trouble thinking about them because it's interesting. I feel like this should be something I know about myself. I guess that is kind of the danger, though, about disliking things on principle. You probably won't realize that's what you're doing until someone points it out, that is. So, yeah, feel free to point stuff out about me. Anyways, what I had planned on saying as far as the whole liking things on principle versus disliking things on principle thing goes is that it seems to me that the biggest difference is where the consequences show up. I won't say that the consequences are worse for one or the other necessarily, because I don't necessarily think that's the case. But I feel like if you like something on principle, then it's more likely to bite you in the ass, if at all. Whereas if you dislike something on principle, you're more likely to do something that will bite someone else on the ass. I just mean it's a difference between realizing that you chose a career path that you really actually hate and being a racist. Yeah, I should probably cover more examples and exceptions, but instead I'm gonna move on. So, words. I'm kinda glad you agree with me, James, because yeah. Really, I have the most to say to Jeff out of all three of you. Jeff, it kinda seems like you're blaming the language for the fact that we have so many concepts that need to be described, which, quite frankly, I don't think is right. Because when you say that a simple language would have one word for one idea and one word for every idea, that's kind of the goal, I feel like, with our current language. I mean, why else would we differentiate between elated and ecstatic? And sure, our language might not be so blatantly categorical as the one in 1984. I mean, we don't go around saying good and plus good and double plus good or whatever it was. But it's not as if our language is without patterns, and I think that's kind of a key part. Like with suffixes and Latin roots, we can actually kind of figure out what words mean. It's not a perfect system, granted, but that's what happens when you use a language for a long period of time. It gets bastardized. It's just what happens, but still. I find language as it is to be a relatively organized system for categorizing things like abstract concepts that we otherwise wouldn't be able to. And unless we come up with millions more words or come up with simpler humans, then we won't be able to reach what you're suggesting with the whole simple language being a one word per one concept. Fantastic time not to be able to think of the word for something. But anyways, I do think it's important that we are able to differentiate, for example, between ecstatic and elated. I'm not sure why I like those words, but I'm using them. I think it speaks pretty well for our ability to say exactly what we need to say. Granted, there are some holes like what Katie said about the color blue. I mean, sure, if you just say the word blue, it might get lost in communication just what hue you mean. But I feel like that's where the other aspects of language besides words come in, because we do have things like metaphor and other comparative tools to say exactly what we mean. Granted, if I describe something as being the color orange that you would find in a sunset, then yeah, that kind of hinges on your having seen the same kind of sunset that I've seen. So yeah, our experiences do come into play even in our languages, but I think that's kind of fair game. I mean, who says language has to exclude experience? Considering how hard description can be without comparison, I feel like it's a good option. And following James's train of thought with the whole do we see the same colors as everyone else? Who cares? Okay, yeah, I do. But it's actually one of the things that I choose not to think about too much because it really doesn't accomplish much. It's kind of the same situation as thinking about paradoxes. I mean, sure, it can be a little mind-boggling to think that 0.9 plus 0.09 plus 0.009, etc., that equals 1. But at a certain point, I can't be bothered to worry about how many grains of sand are in a heap. It's like It's like arguing with someone over something that you two actually agree with. I'll point out Katie's video, because Katie kind of laid it out at the beginning of her word segment that she agreed with Jeff and therefore disagreed with me, I suppose. But as I watched your video, I didn't find anything contradictory in there. It was just that we decided to choose different aspects of words as our focal points. I was saying that words do their job, which is to categorize things, and you were kind of saying that that job is a stupid one, which I can't really argue with. However, I still feel that words do their job, and they do it well. And not that I didn't appreciate what he had to say, but I feel like if it were just you and me having that conversation one-to-one, nothing would have been gained from it. It's just things like that where I feel like if people spent their energy elsewhere, it would be spent much better. In other news, sitting like this is kind of giving my knees problems, so I think I'm gonna get down now. So yeah, see you tomorrow, Jeff.